How much money you have based on your age can be a really good way to measure whether or not you're on track financially. Not being on track can leave you desperately scrambling to save more money in your later years. And so it's best to know exactly where you stand right now so that you can make the proper adjustments before it's too late. Let's go through and talk about how much you should have saved at every age. Starting with the ripe young age of 20. If you're in your 20s, how much should you have saved? For most people in their 20s, saving and investing is not only an afterthought, but something that you don't even consider. This is your youth after all. You should be going to fancy places, eating fancy things, wearing fancy things. Have I told you that you should be fancy yet? See, look, these are metal ice cubes. Fancy. But in the midst of you being fancy, now is actually the prime time to start thinking about saving and investing. And by the age of 20, according to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, you should have at least $4,745 in savings. Now, I get it, okay? At 20 years old, you probably don't have that saved up. If anything, you're probably $30,000 in student loan debt, and that's fine. Because the goal here is to create awareness, right? To give you some sense of perspective so that you know what to aim for. In your 20s, even if you have a negative net worth, you should still be focusing on building up your credit, starting to save money, and opening up some type of retirement account, even while paying off your student loans. And the easiest way to build your credit score is to get a credit card, regardless of what Grandfather Ramsay says. If you don't have established credit yet, you're gonna wanna either open up a secured credit card or become an authorized user on one of your parents' credit cards, assuming that they are responsible with their credit. Otherwise, becoming an authorized user can actually hurt you more than it helps. I actually have an entire video on building your credit score. Definitely check that out after you watch this video. Additionally, at 20 years old, you're definitely going to want to start saving money. Now, in your 20s, especially your early 20s, you likely won't have a huge income, and that's fine. But at this point in your life, you definitely want to save at least 10% of your after-tax income. So for example, if you're making, I don't know, a conservative $3,000 per month after taxes, then you would want to save $300 per month. And all this money that you're saving will be used for two things. First is to start building up an emergency fund, and second is to start investing. For your emergency fund, I would say at this age, you want to have at least 2 months worth of living expenses saved up for emergencies. This money will sit in a high yield savings account and should only be used for real emergencies. The main point of an emergency fund is to protect your investment accounts. If your car breaks down and you need $500 to fix the thingy-majigger, the very last thing you want to do is take that money out from your investment account. If anything, at least sell one of your kidneys on the black market first before you take it out of your investment account. Now, in terms of investing, you definitely want to open up a Roth IRA, and if your employer offers 401k and 401k matching, you definitely want to take advantage of that because that's literally free money. Otherwise, a Roth IRA is the absolute best retirement account to use because all the money that you invest inside of that account will grow completely tax-free. By the time you reach 30, how much money should you have saved? I did a ton of research online to try and find the most accurate number for how much a 30-year-old should have saved. The general consensus, which I do agree with, is that by the time you hit 30, you should have at least 1 times your current salary saved up. And so for example, if you're making $40,000 per year, which is about the median earnings for all US workers, by the age of 30, you should have $40,000 saved up. And for the record, when I'm saying saved up, I'm specifically referring to the amount of money that you have invested in your 401k or your Roth IRA or both. This money that you're saving and investing will continue to grow and compound. And over the years, if you're consistent with your saving and you can continue to get a 7% return on your investment, which is totally possible, your money will grow exponentially over the years. Now, according to that same Federal Reserve survey from earlier, most people around 30 have between $9,400 and $21,000 saved up. But you are not most people, and the goal should be to have more savings than the average person. And so if the average is this number, you definitely want to try to reach higher than that by being more aggressive with your saving. A great way to do this is to start off with saving maybe 10% of your income. Then each month, increase your savings by 1%. Every month, increase it by another 1% until it starts to hurt. That number then becomes your magic saving number for how much you should be saving each month. Now, if you're 30 and you've only just started thinking about saving and investing, that's fine. You'll definitely want to ramp up how much you're saving from each paycheck to around 15 to 20% of your paycheck. Then on top of that, do the 1% monthly savings increase as well. And again, all of this money is going straight into a Roth IRA or 401k or both to be invested in the stock market, preferably investing into a low-cost, broad market, diversified ETF, something like Vanguard's Total Stock Market ETF. Also by 30, hopefully you have 2 months worth of living expenses saved up so that all the money you save can be invested. If you don't have an emergency fund yet, then split your savings 50-50. 50% goes into building up your emergency fund and the other 50% goes to investing. Once you have 2 months worth of living expenses saved up, then you can invest 100% of your savings. You should also have an established credit score by now, preferably above a 750, that you can save money by getting the best rates on loans. Now that you are in your 40s, how much should you have saved up? By the time you reach 40, it's recommended that you have 3 times your income saved up. Now, the average at this age can be anywhere between $48,000 to about $101,000. But again, 3 times your income. And so even if you're making $40,000 per year, this means you should have saved about $120,000 by this point. And just to give you an idea of how this money can grow, let's say that you have $120,000 inside of your Roth IRA growing at about 7% per year adjusted for inflation. Even if you left that $120,000 inside of your Roth IRA account and never touched it again, by the time that you retired at the age of 65, that money would have grown to $680,000. And if this money was invested inside of a Roth IRA, all of it would be tax-free. Now, the goal with investing for retirement is to invest enough money that you can live comfortably for the rest of your life without having to work again. And so there's actually a formula that you'll need to follow to figure out how much you'll need to invest to live comfortably during retirement based on your average annual expenses. And we'll go over exactly what that formula is in a little bit. But overall, at the age of 40, you should probably have a pretty established career by now. You probably have a house, probably have kids and other expenses. But please, I beg you, even with all of these expenses, do not put off investing. Continue maxing out your investments inside of your retirement accounts, and if you have to, find different ways to make additional income through side hustles and side businesses. It's also worth mentioning that by 40, if you need to make a career change, perhaps you hate what you're doing or you want to earn more money, now is the time to take the leap. But remember, if you have kids, bills, other responsibilities, you have to be very strategic with how you do this. You can't just leave your job to go start that business and hope that the business takes off in time before you run out of your savings. Instead, you'll need to continue working your job and find hours in the day, probably during the evenings and at nighttime when everybody's sleeping, to work on building your business. And this is also the case if you're searching for a new job. I know, it seems super obvious, but sometimes people do crazy things when they're desperate. Don't quit your job until you are 100% certain that you've replaced your income with a new job or a growing business. Now that you're 50, you've entered what's known as the third quarter of your life. And despite how society might make you feel about your age, you're not old and you still have a long life ahead of you, so don't stop now. Continue working, continue saving, continue investing, and working on leaving a legacy. By 50, the average savings in the US is about $149,000. However, it's recommended that you have about 5 times your annual income in savings. This means you should have closer to $200,000 saved. Now, assuming that you make more than $40,000, which I would assume that most of you at that age probably do, then you should have more than $200,000 saved. And so, for example, if you make $60,000 per year, then you should have closer to $300,000 at this point. And hopefully by this point, you've been consistently investing in a 401k or Roth IRA or both over the last 10 to 20 years. If you have, and let's say, for example, you started at 30 and you've been maxing out your Roth IRA every single year up until now, your investments should have grown to about $257,000 at this point. And if you continue investing for the next 15 years, maxing out your Roth IRA every single year, you should be close to $1 million by the time you retire. And by the way, this is assuming that you're only investing $6,000 inside of a Roth IRA. If you're also maxing out a 401k or something equivalent like a 403b, and you've been maxing out both a Roth IRA and a 401k for the last 35 years, then you would have closer to $3.7 million in savings during retirement. Now, obviously this is all fast math and your situation is likely to be very different from what I'm showing here, so please don't throw things at me, but this is just to give you a general idea of what's possible. If you are currently younger than 40, then let this be inspiration for you to see what's possible if you take saving and investing seriously. If you are 50 or older and you're not even close to being at these numbers, then don't stress out because you actually do have a lot of options still. I recently made a video about this titled "No Savings at 50, Do This to Retire." And so if you're 50 and have very little or no savings, definitely watch that video after this. In your 50s, you also may be getting pretty close to paying off your mortgage. And if you're not, then you should really consider either downsizing or finding ways to increase your income so that you can make more payments towards your mortgage. One thing that you really want to avoid in your 60s if you're considering retirement is having to worry about a mortgage payment. Additionally, at this point, you should probably know or have a rough average of how much money you spend every single year. Knowing this number will be critical because you need to know exactly how much you can afford to spend during your retirement years. And again, there's a very easy formula that you can use to figure out how much money you'll need to save to live comfortably during retirement based on how much money you've saved. And we'll talk about that very soon. Now that you're in your 60s, you're approaching retirement, where exactly should you stand in terms of savings? Well, the average is about $221,451 at this age, but it's recommended that you have 7 or more times your annual income in savings. This means by now you should have saved about $280,000. Again, I really want to emphasize this point here, okay? You've saved about $280,000 at this point, but you've also been investing that money over the past few decades. You're not just saving your money at your local bank or in your shoebox at home, you are saving it and then investing it into the stock market. And so at this point, that $280,000 that you've saved is just the principal. But that principal, if you've been maxing out your Roth IRA for the past 35 years and potentially even your 401k, that principal would have grown to over $1.1 million or more by the time you reach 65. And again, this depends on how much you've been saving and investing. If you've been saving and investing more, then that number would be a lot higher than that. Something else to consider is that by the age of 62, you'll be eligible to start collecting Social Security, assuming that it's still around by then. Again, I talk a lot about Social Security benefits in this video here if you want to learn more. But overall, by the age of 60, you should know exactly what's going to happen the moment you enter retirement. There should be no guessing. You should know exactly how much income you should be receiving from Social Security and definitely from your investment accounts. You should know exactly all of your expenses and how much you can afford to spend every single year so that you can live off your savings for the rest of your life without having to go back to work, unless you just want to go back to work because you're bored. Okay, so how about that magic formula? Like I said, the very last thing you want to do is enter retirement guessing. Guessing how much you can afford to spend, spending too much too soon, and having to go back to work at the age of 70. This formula will eliminate that mistake. So here's what I want you to do, okay? If you recall from earlier in the video, I mentioned that it'll be important to know how much you spend every single year, your average annual expenses. You can find this number by adding up all of your bills, groceries, rent, insurance, everything that you spend money on every single year. You need to figure out how much you spend on average each year because this will be a big part of the formula. And just as a side note, the earlier you can figure out this number, the better, because it means that you can better plan ahead. Okay, so let's assume that you spend $40,000 per year on all of your expenses, okay? What I want you to do is take that number and multiply it by 25. Why exactly 25, you might be asking? Well, 25 is 25 years, and if you turn 65, another 25 years would mean that you turn 90, and that's 10 years past the average life expectancy. And so the general rule of thumb is to take your expenses and multiply it by 25, and that's going to give you how much you need to save for retirement to live comfortably. And so in this example, $40,000 times 25 equals $1 million. If you spend $40,000 per year, you need at least $1 million in retirement to continue living that $40,000 per year lifestyle. And so from here, you're not finished, okay? If you know that you need $1 million in retirement to live comfortably, you need to work backwards. Let's say you're currently 40 and for the past, 10 years, you've been investing $6,000 per year with a 7% return inside of your Roth IRA. This means your investment would have grown to about $85,000 by this point. And so assuming that you need $1 million to live comfortably during retirement, you would simply take away that $85,000 from $1 million. This gives you $914,000, which is how much more you need to save over the next 25 years in order to reach that $1 million mark. Is it possible? 100% yes, it is. If you continue saving and investing $6,000 per year, and then once you turn 50, you bump it up to $7,000 per year, and you keep doing that for the next 15 years until you turn 65, by the time you reach 65, you'll have earned a little bit over $900,000. Not quite $1 million, but this is only assuming that you're investing inside of a Roth IRA. If you're also investing in a 401k, then you'll probably have a lot more than $1 million by the time you reach 65, depending on how long you've been investing for. And this doesn't even include the $1,000 to $4,000 per month that you could be potentially receiving in Social Security benefits. That's all I've got for you guys in today's video. If you liked it, go ahead and drop a like down below for the YT algo. Subscribe to the channel if you like content like this. You guys are amazing. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at RealJoshuaMayo. And as always, I will see you again very soon. Take care. That was the best one yet.